All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences. We like to call ourselves Walker. Thank you for joining us today. I'm joined here by Cameron Fordmeir, and he is going to present on how to develop a wellness toolbox and a daily maintenance plan. So we're really excited to have Cameron share his wisdom. Like I said, we're going to have this video recorded and it will be accessible. We're also going to have some worksheets and the slides available as well that I will send to the email that you registered with. If you'd like it to go to a different email, please put it in the chat so that I can add it to that. So with that, I would love to introduce Cameron. So Cameron, he's worked in behavioral health since 2001. He has a master's of education and counseling. Cameron has been a designated crisis responder since 2010, and he's managed services for Benton and Franklin County Jail, mental health, and the prosecutorial division program and mobile outreach team from 2015 to 2021. Currently, Cameron is the regional administrator for the Recovery Navigator program and assisted outpatient treatment with Columbia Behavioral Health, and the owner and operator of Awareness Consulting and Training. Cameron is a board member for the Franklin Benton Recovery Coalition and chairperson for the Youth Suicide Prevention. So thank you so much for being here, Cameron. And I'm Brianna Yoakum. I'm the Director of Accreditation at Walker. So I'll be here helping moderate today. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to say it in the chat as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Cameron.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I do have the chat open as well, and I can see you all in addition to the slides. So if there's anything that questions, any comments you want to make or clarifying, go ahead and put those in, and I can see those in real time as well. And between slides, I'll go ahead and address whatever question that you have. So back in my direct care days, one of the fun things I used to get to do was teach groups. And one of the cool things we were able to do for those in recovery is develop wellness toolboxes and also daily maintenance plans. So for your residents, this is going to be less of a psychoeducational group or kind of a lecture style and more of a fun, creative activity that you can do with people that is real world and applicable to what they're doing and keeping well and staying well. So we'll go ahead and get started with some objectives. So today we want to have a better understanding of why and when to use coping skills. We also want to recognize when we get into this, the difference between what a positive coping skill and a negative coping skill is. We all use coping skills, but preferably we want to gear those to a more positive coping skill, and we'll talk about the difference later on in the presentation. We also want to learn how to develop a wellness toolbox and how to use it. So some of the cool things that we can do in there is you can personalize this, and we'll talk more about that to your residents of their likes and interests, and when to use them is going to be the key. We also want to develop a better understanding of why developing a daily maintenance plan is necessary for those in recovery. When people have been deep into their addiction, a lot of times getting a set schedule and having some different things to hold them accountable, or at least to keep them aware of what's going on, the responsibility is crucial. So we want to do that. And then we also want to learn that, to develop a daily maintenance plan and what the purpose of that will be. So, and yes, the PowerPoint will be available. I will send the PowerPoint out, and I also have handouts for you too to use to your, where you can just print them out and use them with the residents that you're treating. So ground rules, we are going to try, especially with difficult topics, to speak with respect, compassion, and empathy. We are going to not use negative terminology or talk about people by their diagnosis or use derogatory terms like junkie or addict or anything like that. So we're going to use people first language when discussing. So if you do have people in mind, keep that as well. So you're saying, if you have a question about somebody who maybe is dual diagnosis and their diagnosis with schizoaffective disorder and have hallucinations, we're going to not use them by their diagnosis, but we'll talk about people living with or people who are symptomatic with, right? Some topics can be triggering. So most importantly, I want you to be kind to yourself and kind to the others around you. Personal stories are not required, but they are encouraged. So if you do have examples, or if you have residents with specific issues and you want to address those, and what's best to help them with developing a wellness toolbox or getting a crisis plan put together, all the various things we're going to be talking about, please do that. Limitation of training. Again, this is not something that we're going to use to diagnose people. This isn't going to make us have a higher level of education, but this is going to give us some real world practical tools to help those further their wellness and further their recovery. And again, the concept of the parking lot. So if we have a question, or if something is addressed in the chat, or if something is brought up, feel free to go off camera and have a conversation. If it's something that applies to later on in the presentation, or something that requires additional conversation with, we'll go ahead and parking lot that, and I'll give it some time at the end to get back to. So what does recovery mean to us? Traditionally, and in the past, especially in the behavioral health world, we have looked at recovery as solely sobriety and abstinence, and sometimes with harm reduction, maybe a reduction in use, or a reduction in amount, or anything like that. But recovery is much more than that. And so when we're developing a wellness toolbox, we want to put a lot of emphasis on supporters. And so what those supporters do is that we want to empower people that recovery is successfully established in maintaining supportive relationships. So nobody can do this on our own. Those of you that are in recovery, you can think about that you had to do a lot of the work yourself, but along the way, there were going to be people who are helping you, and people who are helping you still in your journey, whether that's a support group, whether that's supportive people in your family, whether that's a healthcare provider. It doesn't really matter. So when we talk about building and maintaining supporters, this can be any warm relationship with romantic partners, parents, siblings, caregivers, behavioral health professionals, and any type of support group that individual belongs to. It can be faith-based, it can be recovery-oriented, it can just be fun and have a group, like a soccer team, or can be anything like that. So what else is recovery? Is creating positive change in the world for an individual and the others around them. A lot of us who are in recovery, part of that is giving back, right? So not only are we establishing a support system for ourselves, but we're also being a support for others. So we also want to encourage that. Empowerment, hope, personal responsibility, self-advocacy, and education. A lot of times when we are deep into addiction or in recovery, things have been taken from us, whether those are physical things, or whether those are things, deep down and emotional, whether that's traumatic events. But we do want to empower people. We want to give them hope. If there is hope for recovery, there is hope for the future. So when we talk about some of these things in the Wellness Toolbox, these are things that we want to establish in there. We want to give them something that gives them purpose, gives them something that gives them hope for recovery, and also provide some education for stuff in areas that they want to learn from. And last, managing our own symptoms and increasing our overall level of wellness. So everything that we put into this Wellness Toolbox is going to be about managing our symptoms and finding creative ways for diversionary activities, things that maybe we have upcoming court dates, or we have work, or we have school, or we have something that is stressful to us. This is going to be a way that we can help manage our own symptoms, whether that's with coping skills or things to keep us occupied on something positive. Any questions before we move on to the next slide? Okay. So let's talk about, before we get into this, because a lot of times we know what coping skills are, but we don't know what the difference between negative and positive coping skills are. So when we're talking about positive coping skills, these are the things that we want to encourage. These are the activities or tools, any type of diversionary activities to include in our wellness toolbox, but we want to know the purpose of that. So when we talk about positive coping skills, these are activities that add benefit to our life in addition to relieving stress and boredom. So yes, anything can be a coping skill that helps that person in the meantime feel better, or relieve times of high stress, times of anxiety, times of boredom that they would other use with bad things. But when we talk about adding benefit to our life, exercise is a perfect example. So if you use exercise as a coping skill, especially if you're doing it outdoors, you're increasing your exposure to natural light, right? So you're getting that added vitamin D. You're also, checking out nature, you're meeting people, talking to people, so on and so on. But you're creating that positive change in your body. You're starting to notice that maybe you're looking a little bit more fit, or you're getting out aggression, or you're getting out anger, you're getting out and releasing those endorphins. Exercise has so much more added benefit than just relieving stress or boredom. Same with creative hobbies. You're seeing whether you crochet, knit, paint, draw, whether you do graffiti in a positive way on a canvas, do something that is creative. You're building something. You can see something from nothing to something that's beautiful and something that's creative and different, or something that's an outlet for your imagination. There's added benefit to that. Practicing gratitude, is a hard one for all of us. So often, especially with social media, we are comparing ourselves to other people. Other people are this far along in their journey. Some people have more money than us. This person has, more fame. This person has more friends, whatever we're doing, but we're not thinking about what we're proud of that we have, right? Because somebody always has it worse than what we do. Somebody is always going to have additional problems, if not those same problems and more of them, right? So practicing gratitude gives people peace of mind. It gives people perspective. There's so much other added benefits to that. Spending time with family, friends, any type of support system. So you're getting that social and that community out there that helps give people purpose and live for just rather than themselves. So those are just examples of what positive coping skills can be. But let's get into the negative coping skills. So negative coping skills are activities that only help relieve stress in the immediate time, but they lead to additional problems, consequences, and can be bad for our health. So these are things like excessive smoking, alcohol or drug use, right? So they're going to have negative effects on our appearance, negative effects on our criminal consequences potentially, negative consequences on our housing, negative consequences of our relationship, name it, right? Let alone our overall health. Risk-taking behaviors. So these are things like gambling is one of those that we have down there, but maybe they're putting themselves out there with excessive, inappropriate or sexual activity, right? Stuff that can lead to more health STIs, things, unwanted pregnancies, things that we would say, well, that's a coping skill. Well, how are you using that, right? And so excessive anything typically can be involved, especially if it's risk-taking behaviors. And self-harming is a perfect example of this too. So for those of us that have engaged in self-harming behaviors via cutting, burning, biting, self-harm, punching, pulling your hair out, whatever that may be, that is a coping skill. And that was one of the hardest things when I was a designated crisis responder active in the field, was explaining to parents that that is their coping skill. And so they would say, okay, well, I'm going to hide the razors. I'm going to hide, any type of sharps. I'm going to put away this and that. Well, we want to focus on the reason why somebody's doing that activity, right? And a lot of times self-harm is a negative coping skill because it's not adding value to your life. It is helping release endorphins, the pain pleasure principle. So can we find something that submit that, right? Is there a different activity? Is that boxing? Is that MMA? Is that, any type of outdoor activity, something that would still release those endorphins and that pain pleasure principle, but not have, the negative effects of doing that, the cuts, the burn, the scars, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is that gives people control. They feel like when they harm themselves, they feel like they have an amount of control there. So is there something else that we can supplement that gives them that feeling of control, gives them that feeling of self-empowerment, whatever that may be? So a lot of times when we're looking at negative coping skills, the best way we can supplement those with positive is, what is that doing for the person? What is the need that's being met? What is the want that's being met? And how can we replace that with something that still does something similar, but has a more positive outcome than just that? So when we're thinking about the things and helping our residents, that is what we want to instill in them, especially if they're bringing that up in the education piece of that. Yes, that is a coping skill, right? But how can we put into your wellness toolbox something that does something similar for you, but has so much other added value? On any type of coping skills, negative, positive, or how to change those before we move on. Good. So commonly used recovery skills and strategies, okay? These are things that we're going to be thinking about and working with our residents before we even develop a wellness toolbox. So we want to talk about, and the common use strategy that we're going to use is reaching out for support, okay? When you are having high times of stress, when you've been triggered or past traumas come up, anniversary dates, any type of strong desire to use, reaching out for support. And what is that, right? Is that going to be a notebook? Is that going to be a pamphlet? Is that going to be a list of numbers? Is it in their cell phone, right? Is it through the computer? Is it in a group that they have to travel to? how are they going to be reaching out to their supports, and how is that readily accessible to them? Okay. The other one is providing a supportive environment. And sometimes the best thing that I've ever learned is we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And sometimes that is just to listen. So if somebody's coming to us, one of the best things we can do is just provide a supportive environment for them to just advocate and validate their feelings, not provide them with, education, or provide them with the right direction that we think we should take, or that they should take. And so sometimes it's less giving advice, and sometimes it's creating more a supportive environment. So how can we do that and also create that into their plan, that's going to be encouraged and something they use? The other one that, especially now, back when we started this, there was very little peer support available, and it was typically more of an AA, NA, Al-Anon. There was very little peer support in the behavioral health system. That has since gained a lot of momentum. We now have peer navigators for everything, right? For jail, for substance use. You have access to the ombuds. So where we want to encourage some of that is sometimes when we refer more to professional help, people feel talked at. When we're talking with peers, they have lived life experience, they've lived that life, can know what it's like to be in that situation. They're talked with. So we want to encourage a lot of peer support, because people can still mix and still go to IOP groups. They can still have an SUDP. They can still have a therapist, but peer support is a little bit different, right? So we want to encourage them to engage in peer support in addition to whatever else kind of either traditional or non-traditional behavioral health providers that they're having. We want to include in there any type of stress reduction or relaxation techniques. And remember, this isn't something that we can tell somebody what to do. This is what's relaxing to them. So one of the things that, sounds kind of quirky to me would be bird watching, right? But I've had several people say, no, I like binoculars in my wellness toolbox, because even if it's not being out there, even just checking out scenery, right? So once again, this is for our residents. This isn't for us. So we can help provide examples, but this can be whatever is a relaxing technique to them, both traditional and non. It doesn't have to be massage therapy. It doesn't have to be, any type of deep breathing. Those things can be included in reminders of that, but this is going to be specific to the person. So what is a stress reliever? What are relaxation techniques that actually work for them? And if not, then that's where we're going to provide a lot of examples on things they can do, right? And maybe test some of those out. Some of the most things that I would have scoffed at in my 20s are things that I do now that I live by, right? I take that time in the morning to reflect and meditation. I would have said, what a dork. Can't believe you're doing that in my 20s, but now it's stuff that I practice: self-awareness, mindfulness, all these things that manifesting, things that I would have scoffed at or laughed at when I was a youngster, now is something that I hold hard, that keeps me grounded, keeps me focused, gives me some of that purpose, reflection, stuff like that, right? So changing negative thoughts and habits into positive ones, that was where we talked about the focus on creating coping skills, but more positive in nature than negative in nature. And so if we can, once again, you want to really focus on what's behind that coping skill. Where is the gap that is feeling? Is it validation? Is it the need for approval, right? Like, what is going on that you want to, and we want to shift those and create more positive habits that allow that same response and allow that same end result, but with a different, more positive way of doing that. And then kind of last in there is going to be our daily plan. And we'll get into a whole section with that. I do have handouts for you as well that I'll email so that you can print those out and use them free of charge. You don't have to worry about copyright or anything like that. You can just print them out and use them. So we'll go over supports, daily planning, and then also crisis planning with that you can have. So one of the things that we want to do when we first is that we want to get to know our residents. Okay. So when we are getting to know somebody, especially for the first time, or they're deep into are new to their recovery journey, who are the important people and who are the important groups in their lives? We want to encourage them to add those into their support system or their support plan, right? Whether that be contact numbers, whether that be time and dates for those when they occur, the availability of them, whatever that is, we want to get to know our residents and know who are the important people in their lives. One of the other things we want to know is what their goals for recovery are, right? The most obvious one would be abstinence and sobriety, but like we talked about before, recovery is so much more than that, right? So we want to figure out what that person's goals are and help them best assist them to get that journey and empower them to get that and advocate that they can do that on their own. We also want to know what their favorite activities, places, and hobbies are, right? That's going to be one of the things that we're encouraging them to do, is to get out and go do those things or experience new ones, right? Maybe there's something that they've always wanted to try that they never had an opportunity to. And now that they're kind of clearing from the fog and removing old supportive in their environment and getting new people, are there other stuff that we can do? Are there new activities we can do, right? What are their favorite foods? Okay. What are their pet peeves? Sometimes is very important. If we're trying to help with somebody and somebody says, I don't like this type of support, that's worth noting, right? Because we're not going to make those suggestions, or we're not going to come with that approach. So we want to know what their pet peeves are, places or people to avoid. If they've had certain assistance in the past, right? Maybe they've been to a certain behavioral health provider that they had a negative reaction with for whatever reason. We don't want to suggest them going to that or suggest them going to activities that are around that, especially if they have been, or at least had a trauma attached to that or perceived, right? And that's one of the things that we have to let go of our own personal stuff and pay attention to that person's perception, because that is going to be their reality. So if they don't like something, it doesn't matter if we do. It doesn't matter if we think or had positive reactions with them. If they have pet peeves and they have places and people that they don't like, it's our ability to listen and support that. So that's one of the things we want to do before we develop any type of support system, any type of wellness toolbox, or any type of daily maintenance plan. We need to know these things about our residents, because otherwise we're going to make suggestions that are going to be unhelpful. If we start doing that, people are going to be really turned off to what we're trying to accomplish when we do these. So things to know before starting a wellness toolbox. We want to know somebody's triggers. Okay. We also want to know what their early warning signs are for when things are breaking down. And this is something that we can also gain when we do, and we can see those early warning signs of making suggestions. And this is something that you want to state in the observation, not, oh, I see things are breaking down for you, or making statements like that. We want to say, okay, you're pacing and I can see that. Is there something I can help? Is this time that we maybe open the wellness toolbox? Is this the time that we use coping skills, right? Like, we want to state with that observation, because that came from them. They're telling you, these are my early warning signs. When I start cussing, when I start, yelling and screaming, or when I start avoiding, when I start staying up late, whatever it may be, those are things that we want to perk up and we want to pay attention to. And we want to get ahead of that before things turn into a more crisis situation. And then again, sometimes we may not be able to. And sometimes things go from 0 to 100 real quick. So we also want to have crisis planning in there. And I'll take you through a whole crisis plan and how to develop that. But it's central to the person. So any questions on, before we get into the wellness toolbox and start talking about each of these individual things: triggers, early warning signs when things are breaking down, and then potentially crisis planning? You guys are going to make this real easy for me. I'm just going to go through the slides. Okay. Feel free to talk anytime or interrupt. So triggers, these are events that are interpreted as rejecting or abandoning. Okay. So A can be something that we didn't actually say. This can be something that maybe was a misunderstanding, right? So the key word is that interpreted as rejecting or abandoning. So that's one of those things that we need to ask for clarification, why it's so important to know the person's dislikes, why it's so important to know these things, so that we can avoid them and have positive interactions and positive activities that we're doing with them. So a friend, family member's partner, or caregiver, or care provider not following up or calling in to check on them. Okay, those can be triggers. Being ignored, any anniversary dates and loss of trauma. That is one of those things that sometimes it's important for us to know. This can just be the simple fact that it's a month away from when I had a loss in the family, or when somebody that I was close to overdosed, right? So these can be things that are either upcoming that we start being symptomatic, or they're the date of, right? This can be any type of traumatic abuse, any type of assaults, anything that could negative happen during our time of addiction, and just natural stuff, right? We have natural consequences for natural disaster. Somebody could be moving from a tornado, lost everything in a flood, so on and so on, right? A fire. So these are things that we want to perk up for triggers: is what are their anniversary dates for past or loss or trauma, okay? The other one is financial problems. Maybe we're having to pay out or have fines. We're just paying bills. Everybody has financial troubles or financial problems from time to time. So these are things that can be extremely triggering to people, especially when our basic needs aren't going to be met. We don't know what we're going to do next with that. We don't know if we can't pay, what's going to happen to our fines. Are we going to go back to jail, right? Are we going to lose our housing? So on and so on. So financial problems are a big one that are triggers for a lot of people. And then illness. This can be illness in the family. This can be their own illness. This can be complications of past illnesses, whatever that may be. Those are going to be triggers for as well. And then work stress. Is the person working or trying to work? Okay. There's going to be a lot of stress, especially when you're trying to get back into the workforce if you've been out of it, or if you've been self-medicating in the workforce and now you're trying a life sobriety and abstinence, but you're still working and you relied on a little crutch to get you through that, right? So work stress can be a big one for people just because work is work, and it comes with a lot of additional problems. There's relationships there at work, customer service, any type of trade work comes with hurting themselves or being out there in the elements. So there's a bunch of stuff that can be triggering for people during work. So keep those in mind when we're talking about triggers. The other one is early warning signs. Okay, and these are just going to be a bunch of examples of things that may be things that people put in there that we want to pay attention to. So one of those is spending too much time alone or secluded. So if you have residents that are normally pretty talkative, they're pretty active, and all of a sudden now they're being very quiet or they're hanging out in their room. So they are avoiding activities that they would normally do, right? They have groups and they're not going to those groups. They have appointments, they're not attending those appointments. They have coping skills, they're not really using those coping skills. These are going to be things that will go, okay, hey, and like I said, the simplest way and the most positive way to do that is just stating the observation. Normally you attend AA, you haven't been going, right? Is there something you want to talk about? Is there something else going on that's maybe preventing you from doing that? So we can use those as, rather than saying, you look like something's wrong, right? Or being very accusatory to that. You can point out the observation and then allow them to kind of come around and tell you if they feel comfortable. And if they don't, we can set the scene for, okay, if you feel different in 5 minutes, 2 days, a week later, you can always come and talk to me, right? So not connecting with supportive people or groups. So these are individuals who we've done support building with. We know what their supports are, and they're not using them. Okay. Voicing negative thoughts or feelings others have towards them. So if they've heard negative things in the past and now they're starting to say those out loud, voicing past problems or past issues, anything that they're talking self-blame, self-negative, talking about guilt, anything like that, that's maybe something we want to perk up and pay attention to. And believing people are out to get them, so that's where people are telling you that whether it's on the paranoia side that people are literally out to get them and it's more of a delusion element, it can just be the simple fact that people are talking about me, right? Nobody wants to hang out with me. Believing those type of things, or that a system, right, is out to get them, especially the criminal justice system is a big one, right? You can't get out of that once you got into it. Now the system and everybody that's involved in the system is out to get them, right? So immediate crisis issues, this can be self-harming, this can be talks of suicide, this can be talks of wanting to harm others, or maybe they're starting to engage in those risk-taking behaviors that we talked about, right? So lack of motivation, they don't have the will, they don't have the want or the desire to come through with some of the things that we've put in their daily maintenance plan. Being preoccupied or persevering or obsessed in certain areas, okay? Anything in an extreme is bad, right? So if they are starting to get onto the extreme of anything, that's going to be something that maybe we want to perk up and pay attention to, because there's room in the middle for a little bit of everything. Increased smoking or caffeine use. I used to have clients that I knew when they were going through a whole pack in a day that, hey, what's going on? You look and seems overly stressed, right? Is there something you want to talk about? They normally smoke 2 or 3, but now they're going through packs and they're having to go to the store over and over to get that, right? They're drinking coffee after coffee after coffee after coffee, or pop, energy drink, whatever that may be. So even if it is legal, even if it is something, maybe they're smoking too much marijuana, and I know that's probably frowned upon in a sobriety house, but when we're talking about harm reduction and we're using other things, maybe those things that they're saying, well, it's legal, I'm going to use it. Okay, well, maybe there's something we need to perk up and pay attention to that. Okay. spending money impulsively, especially if we're trying to create a budget, and that's part of empowering people, is giving them, the ability to make sure that all their rents and responsibilities are paid. But now you know that they're going out and they're buying a bunch of clothes, they're ordering stuff on Amazon, they're doing all this stuff that they don't have the money for, but they're getting that rush for that, right? That fills some type of gap in there. We want to pay attention to that. So crisis planning.
I see Travis has his hand up. Travis?
Yeah, Kramer, great information here. I wanted to just, we'll run into instances where we're seeing some of those things and we're addressing them in the way you want, and still the resident will, nothing's going on. What are some effective tactics to get through that first initial, I kind of put it, resident has their guard up about those kind of things. What have you found that works to get to that, without prying too hard, or just do it in a respectful way, I guess? What are some effective ways to get through that first nothing's wrong statement?
Yeah, that's a good question. And getting to know them, right? And having them divulge some of that already, because if they're the ones telling you and we developing this plan, and they say, I know myself, and when I start doing A, B, and C, that's not okay. So
Yeah.
if they are the ones that are telling you that, and we are the one noticing that, we can kind of cut through that and say, hey Joe, you said and you told us that when these things start occurring, that's a warning sign for you, and that's going on. So usually if you were doing well, you wouldn't be doing those things, right? So we want them to develop this, and then we want to be the assistants with that. Now, if they're still, even though they're the ones that gave you that warning sign, and we're pointing it out in a positive way, we're not accusatory, we're not, ridiculing them or blaming them. We're just saying, hey, I want to watch out for these things because these are the things that you told me to watch out for. And they're saying, yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm fine in this instant. Those normally would be bad, but in this case, everything's cool. We're going to open that door, right? Same thing in our recovery. Most people didn't go to a withdrawal management facility and then come out okay, right?
Yeah.
It takes time and over again. So we do, and there have been several providers that have closed that door and turned people off to that. And we don't want to do that with our support, right? So if they're still resistant to that, we're going to open the door and say, you know what, I'm available at this time, whatever that is, because we have to be realistic with that, right? So, whether it's today from 2 to 3, I'm available. And then after that, I'll be available from 4 to 5, or whatever we're talking about. If you need to come talk about these things, I'm going to be available for that. So we still want to leave the door open. They may be internally processing. They may be kind of going through some other stuff on top of that. So once that clears, and once you've left that door open and they feel like, okay, I can come, we want that to be the time that then we have the availability. But we want to be realistic with our availability too, right? So that's why we're going to give them a time frame that if they need that, they can come to us. If we say anytime I'm available, and then you turn around and you're not available when they do need you, there's that abandonment, there's that loss. Everybody treats me the same. This always happens to me. There's nobody to rely on. Then those self-doubts start kicking in too, right? So again, we're going to allow them to do this for us. We're going to point it out. If they're still resistant, we're going to leave the door open with set times on when they can come to you.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else with examples or comments on that? I do prefer that. Sorry, I have that. Gloria, I see your hands up. I moved my chat from that corner, and now it goes, I'll move it from the corner, so that's where the hands go, I think.
Okay, thank you. So I'm curious. I have been encountering a situation with a particular client where they're violating, they're sharing with me that they are intentionally violating like legal terms or legal conditions. Is it appropriate for me? What I have done is ask the client when they express the activity and their engagement. I at first I was really caught off guard, but I just sat and listened, and so I asked, are you prepared to face the consequences of your choices? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, I think anytime you are putting it back on there. Now, if you were to say, you'll go back to jail, you're going to have fines, you're going to do things, you become more of just the nag, right? You're just nagging to them with that.
Right.
So asking any clarifying questions with that, right? one of the things that I would do besides, are you prepared for those consequences? Because that's a big one, right? That's where we start doing the risk-taking behaviors, like we talked about, having multiple sexual partners. So if you're doing that because you're filling a gap, you need validation, maybe you need love, you need attention, you need affection. Are you prepared to have an unwanted pregnancy? Are you prepared for STDs, or STIs? Are you doing the things that are available? There's nothing wrong with asking that question because you're gathering it from their perspective. You're not
Okay.
putting your thoughts on that, right?
Okay. Yes. And it followed another, series of questions on my end, as well as like, what is causing you to think about taking these risks?
Yep. And that's,
Um,
yeah, and you're
yeah.
exactly right in that line of questioning, because we want to get to the root of that, right?
Okay. Yes. And then I
Because
try to redirect too, is this choice, does it align with your are you doing your steps? Are you working? You're telling me that you're active, you're going to weekly meetings, you're doing A, B, and C. And does it align with those goals, with your activities? But they already know. So it's a difficult, I'm new at this, so it's a difficult challenge to just sit back and let them make their decisions and then be there.
And you're right.
Uh,
And that is because, especially if we care and we're here for a right reason, seeing people make bad decisions or bad choices is hard for us to stand by and watch, right? But
Absolutely.
but like we talked about, part of recovery is empowering that person to make the right decisions for them, not for other people, not for, some other person, for them. Can they make the right decision, and are they doing things the right way because they feel like they should? If they're doing it for other people, you're always going to fail no matter what that is, right?
I absolutely, I agree 100%.
So the other thing that maybe, and you sound like you did it, which is great, right? We want to ask them, especially when people start self-sabotaging, right? Like, where is that self-sabotaging coming from?
Right, right,
Right. And, and you can still ask that. You don't have to be a therapist to go back, and maybe that's a childhood thing. Maybe that's an adolescent thing. Maybe that stems way, way deeper. And rather than, staying in someone else's lane and staying in ours, that's something that we can encourage them. If you don't have anybody to talk to about that, maybe that's something that we set up an appointment for you to talk about, because it sounds like that is, going to be a future potential issue. If it's not right now present issue, it may get worse in the future, right? So is that something that you want help with? So we can start kind of pinpointing a lot of these issues. And a lot of times, we do this, taking a step out and going back to that, working with schools, for example. When kids are acting out and they're not behaving well, the teacher doesn't know if this is just a bad kid as the immediate thought, versus, was that kid up all night worrying about their mom from their abusive father? Was that person up all night and couldn't sleep because there was a party and a rager going on, right? Typically, there
right.
are things behind the scenes that what we're getting is very surface level.
I'm a firm believer that behavior is communication. It to me, absolutely. I observe, the whole person, body language, speech, the whole encounter, the whole engagement can tell me a lot about, and then I'll, glean, I'll ask questions, I'll try to, get to have them identify and express to me things they're experiencing that are causing that change. I'm really, really getting a lot out of this training. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And I'm glad. This was something, when I was first starting out, made a lot of sense to me. And I saw a lot of progress with people, because we were giving a supportive avenue for the person themselves to fill in the blanks. Right.
Yes, absolutely. Right. It's their journey. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we have that information, or they can give that to somebody else that they think is more supportive or who they want, right? It's their information. And then we can rely on that person too. Hey, have you talked to so and so? And are you following the things in your plan? Like you said with the steps, but are you following your crisis plan? Are you following your daily maintenance? All of these things are going to go into something. And when we do it, I'll show you later on, there's a creative outlet for that too. That person can use their personality, their own creativeness, their own likes and interest, and kind of make this to where it's not such a psychoeducational heavy, work-related therapy topic, this is going to be something that's a fun outlet for them, but it's also self-exploring.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So crisis planning. These are things that everyone in recovery should have. When I was doing IOP groups, besides the regular curriculum, I introduced this, and I thought that it would be met with some resistance, and it was not. Most people very much had crisis in their life, had been experienced with crisis, and then really thought, man, I wish I would have had this when I was in crisis, or when I did need treatment, or when I had to go to a facility, so on and so on, right? So crisis plans are to be developed by the individual with our assistance, whether that's with a provider, our supports, or peers, right? We can encourage them if they don't want to do it with us. We can give them the tool. Maybe they can do it with whoever they feel more comfortable to do that with. So crisis plans are easy to develop, especially with structure and assistance, and that's what we want to provide them when we do this. Crisis plans also should be easily accessible for the supporters we feel comfortable with, whether they're in-house, underneath their bed, in their closet, whether they're given copies to their providers or their supports. These are something that we want readily accessible. We don't want to say, oh, it's way back in my storage unit, right? We don't want somebody to not have access to them, and give them and encourage them to give them access to people that they trust. And you don't have to give the entire crisis plan to them. We can only give them sections of it. And we'll talk about the sections when we go through it. But you can just give one section rather than the whole thing, because maybe you don't want a specific supporter to know all the other things that you give them, and you can piece that out to other people too. So when we talk about more about that, when we go through, and feel free to ask comments or questions. So crisis plans should be revised after episodes of relapse or crisis episodes where danger to self, others, and gravely disabled have occurred. So we can use that same template, but when we learn certain things from each experience, right? So if something happens to us and we engage in another crisis episode, whatever plan we make after that supersedes that one. Lori, you still had your hand up. Do you have anything else to add to that, or is that just from the last one?
Oh, I apologize. Thank
No
you.
worries. All right, so moving back. So what is a wellness toolbox? I don't know if you can all see me on the screen, but I've really liked these ones, the ammo cans. I like them because they can be locked. There's stuff in here, right? So a wellness toolbox can be anything. It could be a duffel bag. I like these also because they come in different colors. We can use them for whatever, right? So those are some of the ones that are my favorite to use, but I'll show you a bunch of different examples. Now, these can be duffel bags. These can be actual toolboxes. These can be binders. They can be whatever that is that you want to do. But the purpose is to have things in them, right? Playing cards, notes with supporters info, video game stuff, anything that you can have that the person would benefit from in the meantime. These can be long-term coping skills. These can be, I got a court date coming up and I'm super nervous. Okay, where's your crafts and stuff at, right? We want that stuff readily accessible in their wellness toolbox for whatever we do. So here's some of the examples that people have used and developed. You can do it on the cheap and creative. They converted a coffee can and did, a creative project and put wallpaper on it, or they drew in that you can glue that on there. They can be more industrial, and be heavy duty and lockable. So people have done that. Some people actually make their own, right? And so if they have skill sets on that, they're making a custom one for them. That they can be totes and bins, binders, whatever this is. And sometimes we have funding for that we can just get a bunch of stuff and they can kind of put stickers on them. They can paint them. They can marker them up. They can do whatever they want to do. So if there are funds available, maybe that's something that you want to think about doing is, how many of these can I get for my residents, and how can I introduce it in a fun way? And if it isn't that style, what style would work for them, right? Because we want it to go with their personality, and they don't have to cost. So they can be stuff that costs money and is actually pretty expensive, or they can be things that are super cheap and we can do on a budget that we can find a bunch of stuff at the Dollar Tree or Dollar General, right? This is for them. So it isn't for us to press on what that may be. It can be small, it can be big. The thing that we want to is that it's just filled with things that keep them going, things that are the things that we talked about, their supports, their peer groups, information, numbers, tasks, tools, fun things that can keep them going. So when we talk about this, that's just to get your mind going and get thinking about some of the creative things we can do and use just stuff around the house too. So anything like that can be very useful, very helpful, and it gives that person time to do the activity. It gets them thinking, right? It gets that creative juices flowing and that outlet that may spark other things that they were thinking about. So once again, it can be anything. Just put your creativity, put your mind to it. Finances are another thing to consider. So what should be in a wellness toolbox? Okay. We want that list of supports, whether that's on a notebook paper, whether that is a binder, whatever that may be, notepads, I don't care what it is. We want to know and have access to the supports and how to contact them. Is it a website? Is it going to be an address? Is it going to be their phone numbers? Is it going to be a list of where and what times those are at, right? We also want to know their peer services and do they have peer contacts? Maybe there's an issue that they need advocacy and they need the ombuds number, or they need their local, crisis and regional line. Focusing tools. One of the big things that I love doing when I do trainings is I bring fidget spinners or I bring those cubes that people can do and stuff. So even if they are sitting there, can they have focusing tools that help them sit around, and maybe they bring them to meetings, right? And they keep them going so that they can pay attention and focus. Is it Play-Doh? Is it, anything that can be used and molds with their hands? And more of those tactile tools to keep them focusing. It's very hard for me to sit for hours paying attention to something when I don't have anything to do with my hand. A doodle, is it pen, is it paper? Is there something they can do to help them focus? The other one is going to be stress reduction techniques, relaxation tools, whatever that may be. Maybe it's a list of yoga poses. Maybe it's a deep breathing exercises. Maybe they're just cool things like video games or books or, anything that helps them access a list of websites, whatever that may be for those exercises. But the goal of stress reduction wants to be in there. So keep those in mind when we're building these, that we want these categories. The other one is diversion tools. So diversion tools are going to be things like crossword puzzles, Sudoku, things that are going to help keep their mind occupied. So it's kind of a coping skill, but we can do that when there's updated events coming up, things that are making them nervous, right? They have a hearing, a CPS hearing, maybe they're trying to get their kids back. Maybe they have an upcoming court appointment for, past criminal stuff. There's nothing you can do about that coming up, but is there something you can do to keep your mind occupied in the meantime, right? So whether that's, like we said, crossword puzzles, any type of drawings, any type of fun activities that used for diversion and necessary in addition to coping skills. We also want to have items to encourage exposure to natural light, right? Maybe that's a tennis racket. Maybe that's a football. Maybe it's a softball glove. Maybe it's a thing for hiking, whatever that is. We want to give them reasons to get out and experience nature, get that natural light. Even if it's a cloudy and rainy day, just being outside sometimes and getting that, right? And this is not our time to judge. Maybe it's their favorite pack of cigarettes. Maybe it's their favorite tea, right? Maybe there's something that they enjoy sitting out on the porch and having, cocoa or having, whatever that is. So these can be items that want to get out and go get that exposure to natural light. The other one we're going to talk about is journal writing. When I was younger, I thought journal writing was like keeping a diary, right? It was like, oh, today, is March 8th. And on March 8th at 3 p.m., I did A, B, and C. Journaling is not just that. Journaling can be a whole different way. And we have slides and we'll get into on what you can use journaling for. But journaling is for whatever they want. They can even create stories, right? But they want something because we want to be able to track and give them an outlet for that, whether that's keeping track of their dreams, whatever it may be. So journal writing tools, techniques, stuff like that will be in there. And then your daily maintenance planning tools. Okay, we'll talk about those as well as we further on get into the presentation. So supports. One of those things that we want to do is when we're helping them create their support is who are their supporters? And if they don't have supporters, okay, then who are some people you are a supporter of? Let's get them thinking, right? Is that something that you've done in the past? And what are the qualities of people that you would want in a support system, right? So sometimes people were going to say, well, I don't have any support. Well, if that's the case, then what are qualities? What are things, organizations? What are values? What are ethics? What are morals that you appreciate? What are these things to get them thinking about setting that up, right? And a lot of times people don't realize that even though they may feel like they don't have supporters, they've been a supporter for somebody. So those qualities that you have done and you have given back to, what are the qualities that you can seek out that somebody would do the same for you, right? That you have found useful. So developing a strong support system, becoming a member of any type of support group, that's going to create that community for them. It's like-minded people with like-minded interests. They have other people that they can rely on, get additional perspectives that they aren't thinking about. Participate in their community, whether that's special interest groups or faith-based organizations. They can volunteer, right, and learn how to do that. Maybe they feel like they need to give back for people that have helped them or organizations that help them. Can they volunteer and get into support system that way? Stay connected with past friends and acquaintances. So is that going out to coffee? Is that engaging in a group chat? Is that doing whatever, going out for, any type of supporting sports events, right? Whatever that may be, are you going out with mutual friends or reconnecting with old friends or acquaintances? And again, we want to make mutual support a high priority. So we want to encourage them to have that support. Everybody needs that. Nobody can do this on their own. And if you can, I want to meet you, right? I want to learn how you do that completely on your own. Because even then, I know that somebody along the lines helped you, whether that was a mentor, whether that was somebody that was a group or a YouTube or something. Somebody gained something from someone. So peer support, again, the most obvious ones, right? And why peer support is so crucial is that these are individuals with live life experience who are well into their own recovery journey sometimes. So certified peer specialist is a new term. We used to call him by a different name, but it's going to be, and I hate that acronym now, is CPS. But that is the new term, and that is the new actual credential that peers will be able to get. Before, they had to be agency affiliated, but if they're a certified peer specialist, that's actually a credential that they had to obtain and keep up with, right? So those are people who have been through the course, and then they probably are a recovery navigator, or they're a navigator for the jails. They have some purpose outside of just peer support. They have specialty areas too, in addition to that. And the classic AA, NA, Al-Anon too, right? Any type of the recovery navigators that are helping with harm reduction type and basic needs items. So we want to connect them with people who are going to speak their language, who have lived that life. It's so much better to know that somebody is experiencing or has experienced what you have versus somebody who feels like they're in a position of power or in a position of authority telling you what to do, right? So we do want to encourage peer support of any type of kind. This can be, once again, back to the person. We want to figure out what type of peer support they appreciate, what areas of peer support they want, right? So when we talk about stress reduction, focusing, diversionary activities, exposure to natural light, these are just, I won't death by PowerPoint you, but these are all going to be lists of things that we could possibly do, right? If the person's more on the creative side, is it crafting, quilting, crocheting, right? Diversionary activities, do they do crosswords, jigsaw puzzles? Are they a gardener, right? Are they a cook? Do they want to, get a bunch of ingredients and try new meals that they've never tried before, try new ingredients and stuff like that? Do they build models, right? Do they like different novels or graphic novels? Do they like a certain type of anime or cartoons, or are they more of an action person and they want to put those mangas or their comic books or maybe just movies and DVDs that they have that they can watch anytime? Digital art. So do they have access to a tablet? Is there stuff that they can do online, playing cards? Whatever that may be, there's a whole list of these things to think about. But when you have a list and you can present them to people, they can simply just circle these, right? Even if they, and then put a different asterisk by the ones that they are already doing, that they enjoy doing, and then ones that are new to them that they want to get into, right? So is bird watching that? Like I said, that would sound kind of quirky to me, but hey, when you're out in nature and you can check things out with, binoculars, maybe it's scenery, right? So there's other things that get them thinking, maybe it's not just bird watching, but are there other things that I would like to do and get out into the environment and do? So when we provide this in a way that is a list for them, we don't hold them on the spot and say, what do you like doing? And then they have to think about all of the various things that maybe they could do or what. We have a whole list of them that gets the juices flowing and kind of examples that we can build upon, right? So any questions on that when we present that to our residents? Okay, On to the next. So journaling. Okay. This is one that I have learned to do for me. Like I said, the old me would have said, what a dork. I can't believe you do that. And I would have said, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a 20-year-old idiot, right? So journaling is just for the person. Okay. There are no rules. There is no style for this. And it can be any type of notebook. It doesn't have to be a fancy bound one that with engravings and looks really cool, right? And has the little tassel that holds their space. It can be a spiral notebook. It can be loose leaf notebook. It can be whatever. So the style is not important. It's the concept that we want, but we do want the person to be creative with that. What do they like? What kind of, what kind of journal would they appreciate? Is it a fancy one? Okay, let's save up some money and buy a cool fancy one, right? If it's just notebook paper or they don't like lines in it and they just want the printing paper, okay, we can do that too. Is it colored paper, right? Then again, what kind of tools do we want with that? The other things to think about is that journaling doesn't have to be, I woke up at this time and did A, B, and C. Then I got and took a shower and I felt better. Then I did this. It doesn't have to be like, what am I doing throughout the day? This can be keeping lists. What are my goals? What do I need to do? What do I need to accomplish? What is stressing me out, right? This can be a list that sometimes I feel so much better when I make my list for the day. And the simple fact of crossing that off is a stress reliever that I accomplished something. And I can see it. If I don't make my list, sometimes I forget stuff, right? Same thing with the grocery store. If I don't put my stuff on the list, I get home and go, I needed that. It's the same thing with my tasks for the day, right? So I know I got to pay this bill. I know this is upcoming. I have to maintain this appointment. I need to do this for fun. This is coming up on the weekend. I can make my list for the day or for the week. And when I cross them off, that is a stress reliever just in that. The other thing people can do is back when sometimes when people are using, they stop dreaming or they stop having the ability to remember their dreams. And now all of a sudden they're getting these vivid, very lucid dreams. Well, sometimes I want to record those. That was a weird dream. I wonder what that means, right? So are we recording some of the dreams? Or are we responding to the frequent questions that we ask or questions that we want to ask that we haven't been able to ask? We can explore and track our feelings, wants, and needs in progress. When we are doing a new support group, that person wants to be able to say, what did I like about that group and what did I didn't like, right? Because sometimes didn't like is more important. Then we can establish where do you want to go back and is that working, right? Or do we need to try a different group, right? Are the people I'm vibing with? So sometimes they're knowing that I've had the list, but I'm tracking my progress with that, or I'm tracking my feelings or my wants or my needs. Am I getting what I need out of this support group? Am I getting what I need out of this activity? And if I'm not, it's maybe time to pivot to a new one. For those of us that are creative, these are where we can do songs, poems. We can write what we want to manifest and what we want to recite on our vision board. We can write novels. We can write fiction. We can do whatever. I was working with somebody who's currently working on a graphic novel. So that's something that's always, every time I bring it up, that's a perk up interest of it. Yeah, and then I'm working on this arc. And then it's like, okay, cool. And it gives them an outlet to, they're trying to do their own, artwork in addition to that. And so sometimes whether you draw pictures, whether you do captions, whatever you do with that, it's still getting those feelings out, right? If you've ever seen sand trade and play therapy with kids, or even when they're just playing with their toys, sometimes what they do is what they're hearing in their life, right? They're playing out what people have told them or what they've seen or any type of traumas. This is another way to encourage people to do a productive outlet of that. If they're making stories or drawing pictures with captions, this is one of those ways of getting that stuff that's really in their internal out and in the open, right? And one of the other things that we don't think about too is sometimes if it's negative in nature, then we can destroy it, right? We can rip it up, we can stomp it out, we can throw it away, we can shred it, we can do whatever we want to it after that, but at least we got it out. So that's another thing to think about when we talk about journaling. So important journal guidelines for wellness, okay? So again, when we're talking about this, we want to pick a style of paper or notebook, and we talked a little bit about that already, that works for the person, but captures their personality and their interest, okay? If you're more into what you're doing or writing or the style of it, it's going to be a little bit more fun than it's just a plain notebook or whatever. And maybe that doesn't matter to the person, and that's fine too. Do they have a quality writing tool that works well and writes? There's nothing worse than getting ready to do that, having a bunch of ideas, ready to let it flow, and all of a sudden you don't have a pencil that works, right? Or an eraser that works. So do they have a pen that flows really nicely? Is it a marker? That's fine. I don't care, as long as they don't have to stop what they're doing and stop that, momentum to go sharpen a pencil or go. So do they have multiple pencils that are all sharpened with all having erasers, right? Is there something else that they get? David asked, will we get a copy of the recording? Yes, you will. We'll get a copy of the PowerPoint. You can still have access to the recording as well. And then I will give you, when we go through at the end of this, the support building task so that you can just print them out and use them with it. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or you can take what is there and just make changes to it as you see fit. So you'll get all this stuff. Find time and place to keep your hand moving and writing the entire time. So we want to encourage them to find time that is not time that they're going to be preoccupied with doing other things, right? This is a set time that they can just sit there and vibe, maybe put their headphones on and just start writing or doodling or doing whatever. You don't want to be worried about having to do this responsibility or get to this meeting. This is time set aside that we can just do what we want to do for journaling. We don't worry about grammar, punctuation, spelling, penmanship, none of that stuff, right? So they can write in code. They can write as improper as possible. They can just blab on with run-on sentences. None of that stuff is important. This is for them. So if somebody's saying, I don't have good penmanship, I don't have anything, that's fine. You can just rock and roll with whatever it is that you want. Don't have to spell check. You're not presenting this to anybody. You're not grading this, right? Protect your journal by keeping it safe in a safe plot is another one. Whether they need to keep that with them, put it in their backpack, right? If they feel comfortable with having that under their bed, or they're not worried about somebody else looking at it or taking it, making fun, whatever that may be. So we want to encourage them to keep it in a safe spot. Is that in their car? Is there another area? Can they put it in their wellness toolbox and we have a lock on it? Whatever that may be. Okay? So if somebody is having a hard time journaling, we want to ask them the following questions, okay? And this can be something that you can put in and change as you see fit. But if somebody's got a writer block, if you had your life and you could do anything you want with it, what would that be? If you could have things any way that you want, what would that be, right? What do I like about myself and others? What is making me feel good or sad today? What made me feel happy and excited about in the past, present, and the future? What are my stressors in life? And more importantly, what can I do about them, right? Because that'll tell them, some of them they can't do anything about. Well, we don't want to put all of our focus on that. We want to put the focus, even though we acknowledge that it's a stressor, let's put our focus on the ones that we can do something about. Who and what are my favorite people, places, foods, and activities? Write a letter to someone you want to tell off and then destroy it, like we talked about, right? Or write yourself a letter from when you were a small child or a few years ago. List the qualities or things I dislike the most and want to avoid. Right. So these are just examples that we can get if people are like, I don't know what to write about. We'll just bring up some topics for them, or provide them and just give them to them so they can start thinking about these things. So when we talk about a daily maintenance plan, okay, it is very important when we're talking about daily maintenance because addiction has run people's lives. Okay. When you wake up in the morning and you think about that first drink, and you think about, how am I going to get my next fix, right? I have bypassed activity after activity, person after person, date after date, because my main focus was on my substance use, okay? That ruled your schedule. That ruled your life. That ruled what you did when you got out of bed, how long you did it, how much you tried to do to get it, so on and so on. So addiction tends to run our lives and our day-to-day activities. During our addiction, we have let substances take priority over our schedule. We missed work, we missed fun activities, we missed family stuff, so on and so on, right? Due to that substance. So substances have replaced the importance of work, school, hobbies, communities, family activities, etc., where we want to give somebody a list of things that they can do and easily track with dates, times, those activities. We want to be able to provide them that you get to dictate your schedule now, right? So sometimes we no longer have the skills to effectively prioritize our day-to-day activities, and it can be extremely overwhelming. One of the things besides the substance use, that this is kind of something that you can think about too, is when I was working with individuals who had been incarcerated, whether that was in prison for long periods of times or in jail, the out and having the ability to pick and choose how you run your day is extremely overwhelming for somebody when they were told when to get up, what to do with what they're up with, when to go to sleep, when to work out, when to eat, when to have yard time, all of these things when you are either in a structured environment and now your environment is yours to determine, right? And yes, you may have some appointments, but how you get there, like, what am I going to do? How long is it going to take me to get there? Like, there's so much more that is extremely overwhelming to somebody who is now either sober or on top of that sober and on their, got their freedom back. It can be something that is overwhelming for somebody. So this is an easy way that we can get them to track what they're doing, when they're doing it, how they're getting there. And then on top of that, we can also say how it made them feel. Because sometimes it can feel extremely stressful, and just knowing that that is stressful and that everybody feels that way sometimes goes a long way. That, yeah, it is stressful to get to places on time. And then to now, on top of that, figure out, is this a bus route that I got to pay attention to and got to learn? Is this something that I can get a ride from somebody and how long it takes to get there so I know when to wake up in the morning? These are all things that are extremely overwhelming to somebody who wasn't their focus in the past, and now it is. So I'm going to get now, we'll come back to the questions, but I want to stop sharing and I want to pull up the worksheets for you guys to use with your residents. Okay. Can you all see that now? Okay, I'm getting heads up. Okay. So our daily plan. Now, this can be in an Excel spreadsheet. This can be on a Word document. This can be many different ways. Now, whether you want to use this one, fantastic, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or you just want to take this and make it, or you want the person to create it, right? Whether that's on a calendar, whether that's on anything. So it's the concept that I really want to get into your brains, right? So when we do a daily plan, now maybe we can do a week one, but sometimes that's too much. Maybe we just need to figure out the day. So you can do a week, you can do a month, but sometimes doing the day is a little bit more effective because that gives the person time to reflect in the morning, drink their coffee, and make their daily plan list, right? What do I have to do today? Now, if they get really good at this, like I said, my days run off my calendar. If I don't have this version, if I don't have something for me, I'm lost. When somebody asks me, hey, do you have plans Wednesday? I have to check my calendar. Like, I need to know what I have to do for that day. Otherwise, I can't make any commitments to anything. This runs my life, and I find it very helpful for people who have had trouble or have had any other type of distractions or like we talked about, addiction, incarceration, anything that could be a hindrance to just doing your daily plan. So what we want to do with this is that we want a time, right? What time is that? I want to wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. and take a shower, right? Then I want to get dressed, and at 7 or 8, depending on the time frame, right? I want to now put into my activity here. I want to be drinking my coffee and, so on and so on, right? So even though we have transportation in here, we don't have to use that for anything. You just put a line through it if you need to, right? So again, we want the specific time, we want the activity that they're doing, and then we want to know, how am I going to get there? And if so, how long is it going to take? Because we may learn that going across to Richland sometimes takes 15 minutes, depending on the day. Sometimes it takes an hour 45, right? Depending on what time that is. So even then, we have to prepare for the different times of that is. Now, you're not going to know that until you start going and doing it, right? Let alone all the other things that could happen in that get on a wrong bus, get on a wrong route, not get picked up, whatever that may be. Okay. So the more important thing to do when we start doing this and holding ourselves accountable is how that made me feel, how it felt, especially if I get up today and for whatever reason, maybe I had a bad night's sleep and I don't feel good. I feel irritable. At least I know that I'm feeling that way, right? So maybe down here, when I start getting through some of my stuff, I'm going to put some of those activities that I want to do in there to not feel irritable, right? I'm going to prioritize when I have a gap in my schedule that today I'm going to go play basketball, right? Today I'm going to go to a meeting. Today I'm going to call a friend. I'm going to do whatever that is because how I felt is not how I want to continue the day. So again, these are the things that we want to track. So we not just the time, not just the activity, how we're going to get there so we can prioritize our day. The most important one we want to do is how it made me feel. And this can be after the fact, because sometimes we get up in the morning, feel a certain way, start knocking off our to-do list, and by noon, we feel a different way, right? So even more so, if it's feeling good, okay, how do I keep that? How do I keep that going? How do I keep that momentum that I want to feel good throughout the rest of the day? Okay. So do I need to attend 3 meetings? Do I need to attend 1 meeting? Do I need to attend no meetings? Like, what is that? And all instead of the meeting, I'm going to go do A, B, and C. Okay. Am I going to go grocery shopping? These are all things that we want to put in there. Okay. So is there tasks that we have to do every day? Or is there workouts, right? As I need to go to the gym at a certain time. So this is something for the person. This isn't that we're going to tell them, nope, you need exercise, you need to groceries, you need to do all these things. This is the person's list, and we can assist in the process of making sure we're presenting activities or different things that can help with that. So any questions on developing your daily plans? And if you have other things that you think would be added to this, that's fantastic, right? I'm just giving you the bare bones so that you can get those juices flowing and start working with people and plugging them in. Once again, I'll email these to you so you can just print them off and have the person fill them in too, okay? So moving on for the supporters, which is really important, okay? So this is an activity that we can do with them before we do our wellness toolbox is what is wanted from our supporters. So one of those things is we need a lot of support and help to recovery, stay in recovery and live well. So when we start talking about that, these are the qualities that we want in a supporter, okay? We want people who care about us, people who empathize with us, and empathy is different than sympathy. Sympathy is I feel bad for you. Empathy is I understand how that would be, right? I can put myself in that person's shoes and understand that that's a struggle. I can validate that experience, right? So we want to affirm and validate people's experiences. They want to be able to accept you for who you are. Don't have you all figured out, okay? And none of us do, but sometimes we want to finish people's sentences and we want to go, well, I know you, Joe, and you act this way. That's not what supporters are, right? Supporters listen and share with you, okay? Their own experiences, but they say I. They're not saying we, right? You. If they are going to share, it's this is what I experienced with that. They're going to advocate for you. They're going to enjoy sharing fun interests and activities, okay? Make decisions and take stuff on your behalf if you can't, right? Are willing to follow up with your predetermined plans, whether we agree with them or not, okay? So the most valuable thing any supporter can do is simply listen. Like I said in the beginning, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? So support sometimes, and this goes back to a lot of my relationships I would try to give advice with, right? And that's where me and my partners would butt heads because they have a problem. I have a solution for your problem. And then they say, you're not listening. And I say, no, I am. You had a problem. I have a solution to the problem equals no problem. And they go, you're not listening, right? Sometimes people know what they should do, right? It's like telling somebody, hey, you can stop using meth, right? And then they go, I never thought of that. Oh, what a new concept, right? People know things, what they should and shouldn't do. Sometimes being able to just voice it and hearing it and giving a soundboard, somebody to listen to them is far more valuable than giving them advice, right? And quick fix Dr. Phil help stuff isn't going to work a lot of times. So when we talk about developing supporters, we want people who are going to listen to them, not people who are going to tell them what to do, okay? So a good support system knows that unsolicited advice, criticism, and judgments won't help and may even make things worse. This is important for them to know. The other one is that we want to give them an opportunity to put down who their supporters are, okay? The other thing we're going to do are who are some people to provide support to, because it's a two-way street, right? It's not just a you provide for me and I don't do anything for anybody else. Part of getting support is providing support back. Things are a mutual relationship, right? And that's very empowering and that gives people purpose and reason to do what they're doing. The other one is what are qualities that we appreciate in supporters and support systems, because that'll guide what type of support we give them and where we send them to. Gloria, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I would appreciate feedback. The industry that I work in, I'm often told by my supervisor, my engagements are unprofessional because I try to not try. I just am who I am, and I talk to my clients. How do I say it? Kind of. I don't want to present as this is a business relationship, you know, I am here to do A, B, and C. I talk to them as I would anyone that I meet in a, you know, any setting, mutual respect. But I'm so actually too frequently told it is unprofessional. And I get really confused about that.
And can I ask you who is telling you that?
My supervisor.
Okay. So the question would be had is, when we talk about unprofessionalism, right? Are you
Mhm.
are you divulging, and this is and maybe a question for you to answer, it's just getting on the topic of what is unprofessional? Is it giving unsolicited advice? Is it too much self-disclosure? Is it too flippant with language? Right?
Casual, too
Yeah.
casual,
Well,
non-professional, casual, that it should be very precise, concise, specific. If a question is asked, be precise about the answer. Don't interject. Don't talk to the individual as though, oh, friends, as though I'm a friend.
yeah. Now, your supervisor, right, depending on what the expectation of your role is. Because if we
Right.
are doing a job, we still have to meet those expectations. Now, there are reasons why when we are in a peer field or when we have why one-to-one coaching is important. Because that is going to be something that you're going to have to say, I need specific things. And then I need your advice on how to change them. Because if they're your supervisor, they're dictating what happens in the house, or they're dictating the stuff is, well, what is my role? Is my role to be a peer and provide peer support, or is my role to be a manager of the house and just manage the day-to-day activities, right? I need to know my expectations too. And so sometimes there's going to be good reasons on why you're doing what you're doing, because you want to create, you know, a positive environment. So are there other ways, kind of like we talked with this, to do that in your supervisor's minds that still curb some of the other behaviors that they're saying that is unprofessional and that you shouldn't do, right? Because the number one rule is that we don't want to do any harm. That is the number one rule, right?
Correct.
So
No,
if
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Those are good points that you make, and I'm trying to find a way that I can still. My outcomes are amazing. My connections are there. This is what I was called to do. I don't know how else to say it. My connections are amazing. My relationships are solid. We accomplish all of the goals established. But no, you're right. I need to ask him to sit down and be very, very, very specific, not just what was an example he gave me? I had a family medical emergency. I had to reschedule appointments. And I shared with my clients that I was going to be away for an indefinite period of time. But because of the relationship with the client, I let them know why, and that I didn't know exactly when I would, be available. But he felt that was oversharing.
and maybe yeah, and self-disclosure is usually part of that, and that's why I asked, maybe you're just, disclosing too much. Now, are there ways that you can still get that message across without giving specific examples, right?
I agree. I agree. I think what I was offended by is he said, they don't care. Bottom line is they don't care. So
Well,
don't cloud the space with unnecessary detail.
and maybe that's true and maybe it isn't, right? But we can still and that is a area that a lot of clinicians as well struggle into, right? Where is the line blurred between what is acceptable to share versus what is not acceptable to share? And sometimes the least amount of information with getting the point across can do the trick. Now, if they ask for clarification, right, then sometimes, depending on the issue, but then again, we're there for them, right? They're not there for us. So when we are talking about being in a caregiving role or being in a supportive role, we have to make sure that we're not instilling that they need to provide care or understanding for us, even though, like we're talking about, which is kind of contradictory. And I know you're not saying that you're doing that, right?
No, that's a good point, though. It could be misconstrued easily.
Yes, it can. And those lines can get blurred, especially because we're encouraging, you're getting support, you are also a supporter of, right?
Well,
So
yeah.
those are just some things to think about on why that message is maybe coming across, because we don't want those lines to blur to where they start thinking that they need to be worrying about us.
Now that's a really good point. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I do want to get some time for questions, so I'll get through crisis planning because sometimes this is extremely important, and a lot of people have these. Okay, so this is a personal crisis plan, and back to one of the questions that was asked, right? Like, what happens when I'm getting resistance? Okay, or what happens, and how do I know? This is one of those ways that we can tell. So when I tell the person part one, what am I like when I'm feeling well? What do I do? How can you tell? When it's me and I'm feeling myself and I'm vibing and I've got all the right things going and I'm getting, what am I like? Okay. So we give them an opportunity to put that down. Okay. Now, the opposite is true, is that we want to give them in part two the signs and symptoms and behaviors for when things are breaking down. When I am needing assistance from you, or I'm needing my supporters to step in or provide some assistance from me, what does that look like? Am I secluding? Am I irritable? Am I angry? Am I not sleeping well? What does that look like, right? So we have a whole section here on signs and symptoms for behaviors, on what that looks like. And that gives us that we're not prying, we're not prodding, we're simply putting what you put and what you shared with me is that, hey, you don't appear to be sleeping well, right? So is there something that you're needing? How can I assist you right now, right? We're using their words, their examples. We're not making assumptions. We're not making accusations. So part three is their supporters. Now, this is the best way to do this because I can know who their supporter is or who my supporter is, their role in connection with me, how I get a hold with them, and what specific task this person is going to provide for me, right? And I'll give you an example. If I'm in a supporting role, I need to know when stuff hits the fan, who is taking me to the crisis area? Who is taking me to treatment? Who is calling to do that, right? But I also have plants. I also have animals. I may have other responsibilities. I may have bills. What supporter is going to pay my bills? What supporter is going to be watering my plants, right? So these can be little responsibilities and roles. They can be big responsibilities and roles, but we want to make them specific. Who is the supporter? Who are they to us? How do I get a hold of them? And what do they do for me? Okay. Section on this. But like I said before, sometimes it's what's not helpful, right? I do not want the following people involved in my treatment or my care. Now, they can be a supporter that, hey, I kick it with them, I go to coffee with them, they're fine, but I do not want that person to be doing A, B, and C with me, right? Now, they can, this is optional, of course, and all of this is optional. So I don't want them involved because of this, right? They're too judgmental. They're too this. They tell people stuff. They have lied to me in the past, right? They spread my information. Whatever the reason is, we want to avoid those supporters when crisis is happening. Now, if this is simple acquaintance and they're still in the support, fantastic, but we need to know why we don't want them involved for whatever reason. Okay? The other one is if a dispute happens. Let's say somebody thinks that it's more important to pay this bill or it's more important to do this task. But I have two supporters now who I hold in high esteem, but they're in dispute. So if that's going to happen, which supporter gets to make the following call, right? Which supporter do I trust that will make the following decision that's going to dispute and get it over with, and they'll make that call. The other one is our medication supplements, healthcare providers, et cetera. Do they have a physician? This can be a PCP. This can be whatever type of physician, right? Is it a med provider? Do they have a psychiatrist or an ARNP that provides them meds? And who are the other healthcare providers? Do I have a therapist? Do I have a case manager? Do I have whoever that needs to be, right? Do I have a pharmacy? Do I have a pharmacist? Okay. Now, once again, I don't want you to think that this is a lot of information for somebody to have. This is for the person. This person develops this and they give it to who they feel comfortable giving it to. This isn't something that we just keep on hand and just shell out to whoever else, right? So this may be just for them so that they know, that they think about these things rather than being in a crisis. Because the last thing I'm thinking about when stuff's hitting the fan is, oh yeah, who should I call for support? Oh yeah, who are my providers, right? They're not thinking about that when stuff's breaking down. So the insurance info, any type of medications, dosage and purpose for those, because sometimes we're taking medication like trazodone, for example, that can be used for sleep assistance or anxiety. Gabapentin can be used for pain and restless legs, right? So just because we're using a medication that some people are like, oh, that's what it's for, that doesn't mean why they're using it, right? So we want to know that and the purpose. And it's also important for the person to know. Sometimes we're not taking we just take what the doctor's giving us and we think we know, but do we really know why we are actually taking it? So it's an empowering thing for the person to know exactly what they're taking and why they're taking that also. Okay, so medication, supplements, etc. And these are ones to avoid. Maybe they had an allergic reaction. Maybe they didn't like the way it made them feel. They took it in the past, right? So these are things to track too on things that I didn't like and why I didn't like. It made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't eat. I had diarrhea, whatever the thing is. Okay. So number 6 is going to be community care, respite, support groups. So if possible, put the following in and they can fill this in for whatever that is. Church activities, support groups, name it, right? Part 7 is going to be treatment facilities and psychiatric hospitals, okay? Some of us have been to lots of treatment facilities. We know who's got the good food. We know who doesn't got the good food. We know who's got the good staff. We know who doesn't. We know who to bamboozle, who runs a tight ship, whatever that is. But we have preference. So we may want to go to one over the other. So if it's possible, I want to go to this one versus going to the different one, right? So let me read this chat real quick. Do I recommend sitting with the residents to work through and create a crisis plan together and giving them the materials to work through alone and asking them to provide me a copy later on? We have been doing goals and personal recovery plan meeting in the first week of move-in. Yes, I think that you give them the opportunity. You explain to them why this is important and that you are willing to help with them or provide assistance at all. Maybe they want you to sit with the whole thing, or maybe they want to do this in private and they want to do it in their room, right? Maybe they don't want to do it at all, but we open the door for them and give them that option. This is something they can do in private and we can give it to them and let them work it. And then they can come back to us and ask questions, right? Or maybe it's ask for clarification because some of the stuff can seem repetitive, but has different purposes. But I recommend that you are there on hand and that just knowing that I'm not going to tell you what to write, I can provide clarification on why we're doing what we're doing, and I can provide assistance if you want. So I think that some of these things, but this is going to be after you've got to know your residents with their triggers, their goals for recovery, right? What they like as supporters, so on and so on. This is going to be once they have already understood that, then we compile this. So it doesn't have to be right away. It could be the other activities are right away, and then we get to it later on once they've got a footing, they're in the house, they've done the other work, then we do this. And then, of course, there are also facilities to avoid and why to avoid, right? I had a negative interaction with staff, so on and so on, whatever that may be. And these are other things to help. This can be some things that we did talk about: acupuncture, massage, walks, hiking, whatever that means to keep them safe, their journal, the other things that they think are important, right? I have my favorite hoodie. I want my, sweatpants. It doesn't have to be something that's super, super clinical. It could be something that's just more of like, hey, this kind of stuff makes me feel comfortable and I like it, in addition to the other things in the hoodie. Okay, so then again, these are when we start getting specific with tasks for persons. Like I said, I need my plants watered, I need my rent paid, I need my storage unit paid, I need somebody to take me to my appointment, whatever that may be, okay? And then do not do the following. It won't help, it will make things worse. This is more important too. This is where we want to be, a good supporter. We want to provide a good supporting environment, but unintentionally we're making things worse, right? They feel like they're talked down to and it's like, that's not my intention. Well, the way that you approached me, I don't think that's helpful. That makes things worse. That's very important to know on the person's preference for things. Okay, and then inactivating the plan. What am I going to see? What are the following signs or lack thereof symptoms any longer, right? Actions, etc., that I'm going to know that I'm not in crisis anymore. And like we talked about, when somebody's resistance to that, if they're showing me certain things that tell me they're in crisis, it's very true too that I need to know what are the things that show me they're out of crisis. Okay. Are they back calm again? Are they talking in a certain manner? Is their rate of speech in a certain way? Is their posture a certain way? Are they back to doing regular activities, whatever that may be. So this is where we date this plan. Okay, so we know that if we have multiple plans, whatever has the biggest or the most recent date is going to be the one that we go with. They don't have to do this, right? But they can sign it. They can have witnesses who know they signed it. And if they have a power of attorney or a substitute power of attorney, they can put that on there as well so that we know that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and ask some or see if you have any questions, and I will make sure that you get the PowerPoint, these sheets that you can copy, paste, change, right? Whatever you want to do with them, print them out, use them. So questions, comments, concerns. We have about, I guess, only a minute, but I'll stay on longer if I'm allowed to.
I just wanted to say thank you. This was a really good presentation and I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's very helpful to know. Is there anything that you think would be more helpful in the future to add on to this training?
I'm a social work intern, and so I'm learning a lot, but I guess this is for a different topic. How to deal with crisis when someone is in crisis.
And how to deal with like the actual crisis providers,
Yeah.
or to do
or when the client is in crisis, how to deal with that.
Yeah, and we could talk a little bit about that because I worked in crisis for years and managed crisis too. The best thing that you can do is learn the law and look up the RCWs and the ITA law. Because if you can speak to why somebody is a danger to self, why they're a danger to others, why they're gravely disabled, right? Why a safety plan isn't going to be useful, or why it's not appropriate to use at this time. When you can speak their language and frame the things that have to do with the legality of it, right? Besides just the person and the symptoms, why those symptoms are so severe that they need that, then you're talking their language. Then that makes more sense for them to create a, petition to the court on why these things are in there. So that's most helpful is to know that kind of stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
And yes, Ashley, you can have a copy of the slides. I'll give you those, and I'll also give you the handouts that we did too. I'll email those to Brianna.
Yeah, and I'll send them to the email that you registered with. So expect those by Monday. Yeah, we'll have an email sent out.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks again, Cameron. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.